Okay, so you're not gonna believe this, guys. I just picked up drawing and animation, and I made this really cool loop that I'm just gonna put at the beginning of this video. It's really sick, and I actually made the sound design myself too. So Lethal Company. It's got a new game mode? Huh? This update had a bunch of stuff added that we'll get into with this video, including this new game mode on the second half. First though, we'll cover the fundamental... There's been several changes to the enemies in this game, and I'll quickly run through those now. The first change listed in the patch notes is that the Thumper has finally been reworked to actually slow down like it's supposed to when it runs into walls, which is super sick. This also comes with a buff though, where Thumpers no longer get their speed reset when they're hit by a shovel. Their speed was also reworked to not ramp up as quickly, and it doesn't bug anymore to insane levels, which is super nice. The Spider also received noticeable changes, such as an increase of speed when it's close to death, which is something to note for all of you exterminators out there, and the webs have an increased collision radius, meaning that you have to really be careful when you're trying to jump over or crouch under them. When you add this change to another recent change they made in patch 45 that increased the web count, this is really concerning. The next 4 enemy changes are significant, but there's only one change each, so I'll just list them all out in order here. To start, coilheads now approach with louder footsteps, meaning you can hear them further away and clearer through things like fog, landmines, ambience, basically anything that makes a distraction be a noise. Jesters have an increased follow time and wind time that I'll display here. It's about a 50% increase, which is pretty significant. Forest Giants now leave you alone at the ship a bit sooner instead of camping the fucking door like it's a Rust High Pop server for 10 goddamn minutes. Lastly, which is arguably the most significant of these singular changes, Nutcrackers have an increased kick range and will move while shooting you after a couple shots, which makes them so much harder to deal with, especially for the new moon, which we'll get to in a moment. It's fucked. It's like Dante's Inferno levels of fucked. Next we'll get into the... I can't lie at all when I say I'm actually super hyped for some of these fixes and changes they've added. To begin with, landmines no longer instantly detonate when you step on them unless you step off. There was a bug before where basically sometimes people would step on a landmine and they'd instantly go off even if you just stayed on top of them. This has been completely patched. Another pretty crazy change is the new procedural generation, which feels like a breath of fresh air, because there's 2 new hallways that have been added, one that's just completely diagonal and one that's like a big open room. So that's really nice to see. It'll be interesting to see how we traverse this and avoid enemies through this new large type of room in the bunker layout, because before it was kind of just linear hallways. Some other minor changes to the game were added too, such as a fall damage range decrease, I don't know how to word it, but it's essentially been slightly buffed, so try not to fall off any ledges. The shovel range has also been increased, and it's easier to hit enemies around corners with it. Finally, lightning strikes, gift box items, scrap items, and inverse teleporter locations are all procedural and randomly generated now, which is how they're supposed to be based on the world seed. The last of the new content added in this update would be that... In the new version of Lethal Company, there's been a new save file added, which is basically the new challenge mode game mode. This essentially just acts as a one-day, one-quota competition mode with a leaderboard. Even if the developer mentioned that the purpose of this mode isn't to promote competitive play, I think that's still what it'll do as a result of just a leaderboard being added. I digress though. Let me get into how these randomly generated weekly moons work. Each moon so far has had an outside area based on the generation of an existing moon from the list of 8 we all know too well, with the beta moon being based off of experimentation and the moon we have right now being based off of rend. The enemies and loot inside though, these always stay the same with these moons. The purpose is to see how much loot you can haul out of the bunker in one life and in one day. There's a new leaderboard and lobby system based off of this as well, where you can see who's at the top of your friends list. I hope they add separate leaderboards for the amount of players in the future to give solos and duos some time to shine as well. The new moon each week has a randomly generated name, and when you load in you will notice a purple quota and day monitor, as well as purple suits. You have a set amount of money that you can use towards gear for the day, so spend it wisely. I'll go ahead and go into some strategy for this week's moon in this part of the video, as I've pretty much covered everything new in the update. If you're enjoying it so far, feel free to subscribe. It means a lot whenever I see that number go up, even by one person. Anyways, here's the... I firstly hopped on Voyamaya? Fuck, that's so hard to goddamn pronounce. Anyways, I think it's safe to say Zeekers understood how easy the challenge mood in the beta was, and decided to torture us with this one in comparison. To start off with some key features, this moon has an external layout of rend as I mentioned, and has a stormy weather condition, as well as the manor layout, which is already a recipe for disaster. I guess I'll start the strategy with listing off the enemies I found, then get into some of the loot. I've noticed that right around 9:30 AM, the first enemy that spawns is a nutcracker right in the lobby, and a coilhead spawns on the top floor. Over the course of the rest of the day, I've seen another nutcracker, coilhead, a ghost girl, a spore lizard, and a goddamn mast, and a goddamn bracken, and fucking basically everything. Outside, I've only noticed one forest giant and one dog, but there's probably more of those later on in the night. These enemies can be an absolute bitch to deal with as a solo or even as a team, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue unless you're an absolute min-maxing tryhard, as the place is absolutely filled to the brim with loot, with the total loot count coming in at 3,008 credits. To get further in detail about the loot in the manor, there's quite a bit scattered throughout the rooms that connect to the main lobby, but the best place to go, in my opinion, is the top right and bottom right corner of the lobby first, as there are 2 lamps on the bottom right corner, which are worth a lot, 2 magic 7 balls, which are also worth a decent bit, and then on the top right there's a painting and all kinds of metallic, super expensive items. Keep in mind that while these are the 2 rooms that connect to the lobby, and they have probably the most amount of loot out of the 4 rooms that connect to the lobby, these are also where the coilhead and the nutcracker spawn, so just try to be really efficient. If you want to take the fire exit route, there's a lot of good loot there as well, such as a rubber ducky, old phone, a mask, and an air horn that you'll run into first. Overall, even though I've gone mostly in solo and like twice as a team, I can definitely say the 2 worst things about this moon that you want to keep your mind on are the nutcrackers and the coilheads combo and the bracken combo, and that goddamn stormy weather. So far I've seen 2 brass bells and multiple other loot items that are incredibly conductive, so prioritize the loot that isn't conductive first, or at the very least only keep 1 conductive item on you at a time, excluding shovels. Speaking of shovels, dealing with the nutcrackers is a bit of a must on this moon, especially with this recent buff where they can move after a while of shooting. I'd recommend using one of 2 strategies: rounding a quarter when they shoot their shots before waiting for them to reload and getting 1 to 2 hits in before running to cover, or crouching and getting just close enough for them not to be able to shoot or kick you, which is easier said than done as their kick range has been increased. I also noticed for me personally, if you try to get more than 1 shovel hit on them at a time while they're reloading, sometimes they'll only reload 1 shot, and their attack speed can actually be pretty quick and catch you off guard, so be careful with that as well. You can't really counter the coilheads or the brackens as easily as the nutcrackers though, or even the ghost girls for that matter, especially since all 3 of them are on this moon. Overall, this is one of the hardest moons possible they could have added to this weekly challenge, and I'm excited to see how many scores will get really high. To give some more general strategy, as a solo, prioritize speed. Get in and out as fast as you can and try to use all 4 of your slots for loot at first if you don't really think you need a shovel. Loot as you wish, but again, keep note of the stormy weather. This goes for teams too. However, as teams, have a designated coilhead watcher, or even 2, that catches both the coilheads in the main lobby, as well as keeping tabs on the nutcrackers, as they seem to really only roam around the main lobby for me. That's pretty much it for the strategy for this week's moon, and actually this update video overall. This update's pretty cool, and I think if the game continues adding interesting game modes like this and interesting generation, it'll help keep the game fresh. Though I'm always curious to know what you think as well. Let me know down below. As always, feel free to check out my Patreon down below if you feel like supporting me. Videos typically come out a day or 2 early on there, and I'll be doing all sorts of stuff in the future there, like live streams, hangouts, and more. Also, one more reminder to hit that subscribe button if you do find these guides useful. I'm hoping to branch out in the future, but yeah, that's pretty much it for this quick little update guide. That's the end.